Okay, welcome to the video where we are going to reassemble Young's Ambidex casting reel. Okay, a word about the plate and disassembly of the plate and reassembly of the plate. Essentially, these pieces are riveted on by JW Young's and you can't move them really, so if you push the lever and it should come out from the ratchet and then go back in again, depending on what you do with the lever. So if that works, oil it and leave it alone. Reassembly of the main drum. The cog part here has some blue grease on it, and there's a couple of Teflon washers that have to go back. They fit over and they're a very close fit onto the spindle there, or axle or whatever you want to call it. And then there's a ball race. You be careful not to lose the actual ball bearings. And again, that's quite a tight fit over there, and it really should be too. These are on Teflon washers, so they don't need a huge amount of grease or anything, but they will need a bit of oil. And you put a bit of oil on the axle too. And note also that there's a tiny washer here which needs to go on, so don't forget that one. And then there's a Teflon washer goes over the top like so, and then we're now ready to actually insert this into the real body, and it just inserts like this, and that should turn pretty freely. Now you see that is going to get in the way of putting the nut on here, so you have to retract it a little bit to get the nut on. Now this is very similar to the Alcock's Duco, except that instead of putting a fibre washer onto here, they've actually got a little ball race. This is a ball bearing race here on the end there, which needs to be oiled, and that goes over the end of the axle. And then on top of that, there's a little lock nut that goes over. My experience with these reels is that you need to leave about 1 millimetre of play on these, otherwise they're too tight and they don't work properly. Okay, so you should be able to move it a little bit. You can just see that moving there, and then you tighten up the lock nut and the screwdriver, and that's probably more than enough actually to keep that on. Reassembly of the main cog. There's a sliding part here, so you need a little bit of oil on it. I wouldn't overdo it with the oil, you just need a tiny bit there. And then twist, as you put it in, twist so the oil gets spread. That'd be nice. And that needs to mesh with the cogs here. You can see it moving there. So, okay, reassembly of the cam rider. You essentially, it goes in a pincer over the cam. The cam is the smooth part just here, and it screws down, and that is pretty much it. It's a pretty easy part to put on. This nut on the cam rider is a PEM nut or a catalytic nut, and it has a long section on it which stops you tightening it. When you tighten the nut down, it doesn't make the cam rider too tight, it stays loose. Reassembly of the slider. The slider goes into the aperture just here. Need some oil on it, and it just goes in like that. So then what you've got to do is rearrange your cam rider, which is this piece here. You need the spring to be on the left hand side of the hole there. So just try and manipulate that so we get that, and then we get the pin like so, and you just pull the cam so you can see the hole, so the hole it goes into appears, and there you go, that's it. It's pretty much assembled now. We'll put a bit of oil on there, and that should help immensely. So your reel now is, you can see the mechanism moving up and down, and as you can see it's very similar to the Alcock's Duco. It's not a lot different really, and that's nicely cleaned up. This reel was packed with hardened grease when I took it apart. So okay, once your plate has been oiled, put a bit of oil on this, and it's quite a tight fit, so basically put that down, and there's 2 screws. There's one goes here and one goes here. So if you screw those down, that's your plate complete. Reassembly of the Bale Arm trip. There's an integral spring on this, which generally speaking you don't take off, you just leave it on. So that goes there. And then the larger of the 2 screws, this is a catalytic screw or a PEM screw with which stops you tightening the Bale Arm trip down and leaves it loose even though the screw's nice and tight. That's what it's for. So you put the Bale Arm trip back, put the screw back in, and just tighten that down, and it should still have a good sort of springiness there. Okay, now this screw here, this is the trip screw. Underneath there, on the main body of the reel, there's a little notch. When the trip screw hits the notch, it moves the arm. So make sure you're not screwing it down on top of the notch, which is what I've just done. So there you go. Now if you turn this, you should see, there you go, hits the notch and retracts the arm. Reassembly of the counterweight. The counterweight looks like this, and you put that back, get the screw roughly over the hole, and then put the screw in. Right, that's your counterweight reassembled. Reassembly of the Bale Arm. There's a little spring here, which you can see has a long piece on one side and a slightly short piece on the other side. So the slightly short piece goes downwards into that little hole just there, and essentially you need to get it so that it fits in the hole, which is not too difficult, but it is a little bit fiddly. Right, so the Bale Arm itself, there's a little hole there, and the longer part of the spring goes into that little hole. You need to insert it in so that you can see it coming out the other side. Now you notice when I've done that the Bale Arm is on the wrong side of the trip, so basically keep the spring hooked and just rotate it so that it comes out on the right side of the trip. Make sure your spring's still in place, and then you gotta get the screw into there, the set screw with the castellated nut on it. Now then, one of the things I found with this castellated nut is, or set screw, is that it is rather a close fit. So it is worth going across the surfaces on the back of this set screw and on the real body, and also on this, and making sure they're perfectly flat with a very fine file, and make sure there's no gumminess of old grease and what have you, otherwise it won't work properly. So you tighten it down and you should get a good snap, and if you click the bale mechanism back like so, when you spin it around. Now then, the other side of the Bale Arm mechanism, there's a little slightly loose little thing here that goes over like that, and then the last screw part for that mechanism, which is another castellated screw, and you just gently rotate it back and forth till you get it threaded properly. Don't want to cross thread these because you can't really do much with them once they're gone, they're gone. Okay, so that completes assembly. Reassembly of the drum. The drum has a flat shaft, and it has 2 notches, you see there, which go over the two pieces here. And it is a tricky fit with the Bale Arm. Actually, it's not as easy to use as a modern day or even a mid-century Mitchell reel. It's slightly better than that. And you essentially screw this last piece is called the drag adjuster, and you screw this down, and it is a right pain. And if I remember correctly, the the other reel that I did a video of, the Alcock's Duco. The drag adjuster on there was a right pain as well. Reassembly of the handle. The handle has a brass shaft, and you can put a tiny bit of oil on that if you need to, and that just screws onto there, and it's a right hand thread. Handle threads are quite stiff, and that is now down and home, and they're designed to be quite stiff because you don't want them coming loose. Reassembly of the handle. You have a shim spacer and a set screw, and that goes onto here like so, and is screwed down with a screwdriver. It doesn't need to be particularly tight, it's just reasonable, it's fine. And the other one, this is quite a tight fit, which is a good thing, and some of the older reels had poorer quality castings, and the handles are quite a loose fit, which is not a very good thing. You really, when you're fishing, you want to get as much feel through the rod as you possibly can, and if you've got a good tight handle, it helps that. So that's your handle reassembled. On the Ambidex. So if you flip it, it trips nicely. It is a bit sticky at the moment, so it maybe needs a bit of oil. There you go, that completes the reassembly of Young's Ambidex casting reel.